The life I had built over the years seemed to be solid and unshakable. I believed that my marriage with Sarah was stable, even if we had grown apart a bit lately. These were everyday changes that I thought happened in every family over time. 10 years together, a child, work. All of this could have overshadowed the old romance, but I believe that our foundation, trust, remained unshakable. I could not even imagine how wrong I was. That evening, everything started as usual. Sarah said she was going out with her friends. It wasn't the first time, and I didn't see anything suspicious about it. She looked so normal, even a little tired when she left the house. I stayed home with my son, helped him with his homework, and then we watched a cartoon together. Everything was so calm, even routine, until my phone suddenly rang. Sarah's name came up on the screen. I thought she must have forgotten something, and answered with a little surprise. But instead of her voice asking about something trivial, I heard something completely different. At first, there were only snippets of conversation, laughter, and noise in the background. I didn't even realize what was happening at first. However, when I heard her addressing someone, calling him beloved, I froze. My mind refused to accept what I was hearing. It seemed like some kind of misunderstanding. I kept listening, even though every word she said hit me like a punch. They were discussing their plans, recalling previous meetings. It was not a joke, not a friendly conversation. It was something more. My world began to fall apart. I sat in my chair, keeping my eyes on the phone. Her voice, which used to be a symbol of comfort and love for me, now sounded like something alien. The call lasted perhaps a few minutes, but for me it felt like hours. Finally, the connection was cut off. I was left in absolute silence. There was only one question in my head. How could this have happened? In the first minutes afterwards, I tried to find an explanation. Could it be some kind of misunderstanding? Maybe she was just joking? But the truth was too obvious. I felt anger rising. All those excuses, meeting with friends, coming home late from work, now looked completely different. I could no longer deny what was in front of me. The next day, while Sarah was still at work, I decided to gather more information. I couldn't just ask her directly because I didn't know if I could handle her answer. I checked her phone. My heart was racing as I looked for evidence. And I found it. There were messages with that man, photos from their meetings. Their conversations were filled with the emotions she had once given me. I began to remember all those moments when her behavior seemed strange to me. How she avoided my gaze when she talked about work. How her phone was always with her, even at home. How she started to stay late for meetings more often. Now it looked like a part of a bigger picture that I hadn't noticed before. Over the next few days, I felt like I was being torn apart. On the one hand, I wanted to tell her everything I was thinking right away. On the other hand, I realized that I needed time to think things through. Our son should not have witnessed this chaos. I tried to act as if nothing had happened, but a storm was raging inside me. I was constantly thinking about what to do next. Every night when she came home, I felt how hard it was for me to control myself. Her smile seemed fake to me. Her words seemed empty. I began to notice little things that I had previously missed. The way she changed her tone when she spoke on the phone, how she became more attentive to her appearance. All of these were now signs to me that I had previously ignored. I was weighing all my options. Should I stay and try to save our marriage? But is it possible to restore trust after this? Or should I end the relationship and start from scratch? But how would that affect our son? I didn't want him to grow up in a loveless family. But I also could not tolerate betrayal. My days became like an endless cycle of pain and doubt. I realized that I needed to make a decision, but I didn't know how to do it. Her words, her laughter from that call, were constantly playing in my head. I could no longer look at her the way I used to. Every gesture she made seemed to me to be played up. Every word she said was a lie. I started thinking about how our lives had changed in recent years. We used to be happy, in love. We made plans, dreamed of the future. What happened to us? Was it my fault? Could I have done something to prevent it? But betrayal is always a choice. Her choice. And that made it even more painful. The night I heard her call, I lost not only my trust in her. I lost a part of myself. The part that believed in our future together. Now I'm left alone with my pain and the question, is there any way back? Is there any way to forgive and move on? And most importantly, do I want to? After I heard that call, my life was divided into before and after. Every day was like a struggle, not only with pain, but also with myself. It seemed to me that I was stuck between the desire to know the whole truth and the fear that it would destroy me completely. But the silence was also unbearable. A few days passed after I heard the voices of Sarah and the man she called beloved. I tried to live a normal life, to be a father to our son, to fulfill my responsibilities, but every moment I was alone reminded me of what I knew. I started analyzing her behavior more, noticing all the small changes that I had previously thought were unimportant. Her long calls, the smiles she no longer gave me, and most importantly, her alienation. It seems that these changes began a long time ago. I just didn't notice it. I decided that I could no longer live in ignorance. One evening, when Sarah said she would be late for work, I took advantage of her absence to find more evidence. I knew it was wrong to go through her personal belongings, but the circumstances forced me to. The feeling of betrayal pressured me to find answers. I started with her phone. She left it at home, and I unlocked it, knowing the password. What I found only confirmed my worst suspicions. Her messages were from the same man I had heard her on the phone with. Their correspondence was full of flirting, personal confessions, and plans for the future. They discussed how good they were together, how they wanted to spend a weekend together. Every word hit me like a punch. In addition to the messages, I found photos. They were together in a restaurant, together in the park, even on the terrace of our house when I was away. These pictures were like the final proof that I could no longer deny. In the following days, I started to notice how this situation was affecting me physically. I stopped sleeping properly. My attention span at work deteriorated. I started avoiding conversations with my friends because I couldn't keep up my usual calm demeanor. At home, every moment spent with Sarah was tense. I couldn't look at her anymore without remembering her words from that call or message I read. At some point, I realized that I couldn't hold it in any longer. I needed to tell her everything I knew and hear her explanation. One evening, after we put our son to bed, I decided to talk. I was sitting in the living room, waiting for her to finish her work. When she came into the room, I simply asked her if everything was okay. Her reaction was what I expected, surprise and a little nervousness. I could see it in her eyes. I started cautiously, telling her about how I had noticed her alienation lately, how I began to feel that something was wrong. Then I mentioned the call. Her face changed instantly. She couldn't hide her shock, and that was enough for me to realize that she knew everything. She tried to say something, but I stopped her. I took out my phone and showed her the messages I had found. That was the moment when the masks were torn off. Sarah confessed. She didn't try to make excuses or deny the obvious. She said that their affair started a few months ago when she felt that we had become distant from each other. She talked about how she lacked attention, how she felt lonely. Her words were like additional blows to me. I sat there listening, but everything was boiling inside me. After her confession, I realized that our marriage would never be the same again. I could no longer trust her. I could no longer imagine how we could live under the same roof together. But at the same time, I thought about our son, about how this situation would affect him. I didn't want to destroy his world. In the days that followed, we discussed what to do next. Sarah asked me to give her a second chance, saying that she wanted to try to save our marriage. But I wasn't sure it was possible. The trust that had been the foundation of our relationship had been destroyed. I didn't know if I could ever forgive her. We decided to go to a family psychologist to try to understand if there was a chance of rebuilding our relationship. Therapy was a difficult process. At each session, I relived my pain over and over again, listening to her talk about her feelings and the reasons for her actions. It was like reopening an old wound that hadn't had time to heal. Over time, I realized that continuing this relationship meant going against myself. I no longer felt the love that once bound us. My heart was too damaged to open up again. I decided that it was better for us to separate than to continue living a lie. The decision to divorce was difficult, but necessary. We agreed that we would maintain a civilized relationship for the sake of our son. I moved to a new house, closer to work, and started a new chapter in my life. It wasn't easy, but I knew it was the right choice. Life went on, and I was ready to meet it as it was, with all its challenges and opportunities. After I made the decision to divorce, a long and difficult healing process began. No one prepares us for how to live after such turning points. Divorce is not only a legal procedure, but also a huge emotional labor. I realized that breaking up with Sarah was only the beginning of my journey to recovery. We officially divorced a few months after I announced my decision. The hardest part was agreeing on joint custody of our son. We both wanted to remain important parts of his life, but at the same time we realized that it would be difficult for him to get used to the new reality. We decided that he would live with me most of the time, but would have regular visits with his mother. These discussions were difficult, but they had one common goal: to do everything we could to make our son feel loved and protected. After moving to the new house, I started building a new life. The first thing I did was create a space that would be comfortable and cozy for me and my son. I decided that this house would be the place where we would start from scratch. Every room, every corner had to reflect our new life. I bought new furniture, chose a different style of decoration, even changed the arrangement of the furniture in the children's room so that my son would feel that this was a special place. It was hard at first. I was used to the fact that there was always another person at home. Loneliness was new and unusual. The silence in the house reminded me of the loss. But I knew that this pain was part of the healing process. I allowed myself to feel it, not to run away from it. It was difficult, but liberating at the same time. I started writing in my diary, expressing my emotions and thoughts. It became a kind of therapy that helped me understand myself better. Work became my salvation. I immersed myself in projects that allowed me to escape from thoughts about the past. But over time, I realized that work was just a temporary defense. I needed something more to find myself again. That's when I decided to return to my old hobbies. I've always loved sports and photography, but over time, these hobbies faded into the background. Now they have become my path to a new life. I joined a local fitness club and started training several times a week. It was hard at first, but each training day brought me more energy and confidence. I also started taking my camera and going for long walks, taking pictures of nature. It helped me to see the beauty in simple things again. Photography became a way to express myself, to record my feelings and the changes that were happening in me. My son also became a source of inspiration. We spent a lot of time together, playing board games, reading books, building model airplanes. He was my main motivator, my light in dark times. His smile reminded me that life goes on and that I have no right to give up. One day, while walking with my son in the park, I met a woman walking her dog. Her name was Emily, and our conversation started with a simple discussion of the weather. But over time, this meeting grew into something more. We started seeing each other more often, exchanging life stories and supporting each other. Emily had also been through a divorce, and her experience was valuable to me. She showed me that life after a breakup can be not only painful, but also open up new opportunities. Our relationship developed slowly, but naturally. I was in no hurry because I realized that I had not yet fully healed from the past. But Emily was patient. She didn't try to replace anyone or fill the void. She was just there for me, and that was enough. Over time, I started to open up to her, and she helped me to see life from a different perspective. After a year of dating, I realized that I was ready for a relationship again. But this time I approached everything differently. I knew that trust was the most important part of any relationship and that it had to be built gradually. I also realized that I couldn't forget about myself. In my previous marriage, I often put the needs of others before my own, and this led to the loss of a part of me. Now I have learned to find a balance. Emily met my son, and they hit it off immediately. She was gentle, caring, and always took the time to listen to him. This was important to me because I didn't want him to feel alienated or forgotten in my new life. Over time, I realized that the betrayal that once broke me was the beginning of my new life. I no longer felt anger or resentment towards Sarah. I forgave her, but not for her, for myself. This forgiveness freed me from the heavy burden I had been carrying all these months. I realized that holding on to pain is like carrying stones in your pockets that prevent you from moving forward. Today, looking back, I see how far I have come. My life is now filled not only with challenges, but also with joy. I have found harmony, new relationships, and most importantly, myself. The betrayal was a hard lesson, but it taught me to value sincerity, trust, and the importance of preserving myself in any circumstances. And now I know for sure that even after the darkest night, there is always a dawn. The years after the divorce were not only a period of healing for me, but also a real rebirth. What started with pain, loss, and doubt turned into a time of searching for my true self. After the betrayal I experienced and the changes that came into my life, I began to see the world from a different angle. My past no longer seemed like a burden. It became the foundation on which I built a new life. After meeting Emily, our relationship gradually moved to a new level. She became an important part of my life, but we both realized that there was no point in rushing things. We talk a lot about our past mistakes and what we had learned from our previous relationships. From the very beginning, we decided that our main goal was sincerity and support. We weren't trying to create a perfect picture, but to build a real life where everyone could be themselves. One of the most important moments in my life came when I decided to propose to Emily. It was not a spontaneous decision. I thought about it for a long time, weighed all the pros and cons, analyzed whether I was ready to take responsibility for a relationship again. But every day, I was convinced that she was the person I wanted to spend my life with. I wanted her to be a part of not only my life, but also my son's life. The night I proposed, we were on the shore of a lake where we often came together. This place has become a symbol of our shared history. I remember how she looked at me when I got down on one knee. Her eyes shone with tears of joy, and she said yes. That moment was not only a confirmation of our feelings, but also a reminder of how far we had both come in our lives. Our wedding was modest, but very warm. We invited only the closest people who had witnessed our changes and supported us in difficult times. My son was in the center of everything that was happening. He held the rings and gave a little speech thanking me and Emily for making him happy. Those were words I will never forget. After the wedding, our lives changed, but at the same time remained the same. We continued to create new traditions, spend time together, and support each other. Emily was not only my wife, but also a true partner in everything. She supported me when I decided to develop my career and start my own business. I had always dreamed of having my own company, and now, with her support, I felt I could achieve this goal. We started a small creative agency that specialized in photography and design. My passion for photography became the foundation of the business. We worked on projects together, and it allowed us not only to realize ourselves, but also to spend more time together. Emily was responsible for organization and marketing, and I was in charge of the creative part. Our business became successful, and it gave us the opportunity to live the life we had always dreamed of. One of the most important stages in our lives was the expansion of our family. Emily and I decided that we wanted to have a child together. It was a deliberate and conscious decision for us. When we found out she was pregnant, it was one of the happiest moments in our lives. My son was thrilled to learn that he was going to be a big brother. He helped us prepare for the baby's birth, choosing names, and even painting the room. When our daughter was born, it was like a new beginning. Her smile filled our home with light and warmth. I felt really happy looking at my family. It was something I dreamed of but could not imagine after what happened a few years ago. Life has shown me that even after the greatest losses, you can find new meaning. Of course, our life was not perfect. We faced difficulties, conflicts, and challenges like any other family. But now I knew how important it was to work on relationships, how important it was to talk and listen. We solved all the issues together, supporting each other even in the most difficult moments. One day, looking at old photos, I remembered the period when my life seemed to be a wreck. I felt then that I would not be able to get back up, but now, looking at my family, I realized how much stronger I had become. Those events taught me an important lesson. Every ending is an opportunity for a new beginning. I started sharing my story with others. I started writing articles and conducting seminars for people who were experiencing relationship difficulties. I wanted them to know that even after the darkest night, there is always a dawn. I shared my experience to inspire others to fight for themselves and their happiness. Today I live a life that exceeds all my expectations. I have a beloved wife, 2 beautiful children, and a job that brings me joy. But most importantly, I have found myself. I realize that true happiness comes when you are ready to accept change and open up to new things. If there is one thing I would like to say to those who are going through difficulties now, it is this: don't be afraid of change. They can be painful, but they open the door to a new life. Trust yourself, seek support, and remember that the sun always comes out after every storm. My life after my second marriage has been a journey to a deeper understanding of myself, my family, and that true happiness depends on the ability to accept change. When Emily and I started living together with our children, we faced new challenges. Combining 2 different lives, creating harmony in a family where everyone had their own history, required patience and openness. One of the main challenges was raising my son in the new reality. He was at an age when children are very sensitive to change. His perception of the new marriage, the arrival of his half-sister, and a new family structure was important to me. Emily and I decided that we would be as honest as possible with him, explaining every step we were taking. We organized family nights where we talked about our emotions and plans. This helped create a space for trust, where everyone could express their feelings without fear of being misunderstood. Of course, not everything was smooth sailing. There were moments of jealousy when my son felt that Emily was paying more attention to my daughter. On such days, we tried to find time only for him, walking in the park, talking about his hobbies, or just reading together before bed. I wanted him to know that his place in my heart remained unchanged. Once, when we were building a model airplane together, my son suddenly said, "Dad, I'm glad you're happy. Emily is kind, and I can see how you have changed." These words were a confirmation for me that we were on the right track. It was the moment when I felt that our family had become real, despite all the difficulties. Along with building a new family, I continued to work on developing our business. Our creative agency became more successful than I could have imagined. We expanded the range of services, started working with large companies, and even organized several charity projects. One of them was a project for children from low-income families, where we held free photography and design workshops. I wanted these children, like me, to see that they had the opportunity to change their lives. Emily became not only my wife, but also a true business partner. She took care of most of the organizational issues, which allowed me to focus on the creative part. Together we created not only a family, but also a common cause that united us even more. At some point, I started thinking about how to share my experience with a wider audience. My story of pain, betrayal, recovery, and a new beginning could inspire others. I decided to write a book describing all the stages of my journey, from the destruction of my first marriage to the creation of a new life. It was not only a personal story, but also an attempt to show that even the deepest crises can become a launching pad for change. Working on the book was challenging, but also therapeutic. I was going through my old records, returning to the most painful moments and reliving them. But this time I was a different person. When the book was finished, I felt that I was finally able to put an end to my old story. The book received positive reviews, and I started receiving invitations to speak. People wanted to hear how I managed to find the strength to move on. I was happy to share my experience and talk about the importance of forgiveness, both for others and for myself. This became my new calling, to inspire others to change. One day after my speech, a man came up to me and said, "Your story gave me the strength to file for divorce. I lived for years in a relationship that was destroying me, but now I realize that I am worth more." His words sank into my soul. I realized that my path is not only about my life, but also about the opportunity to change the lives of others. My son, who at first was distrustful of me sharing our story, later became proud that our family had become an example for others. He even wanted to help me during my speeches, telling me his perspective on how children experience parental divorce and how they can find support. Our daughter, whom Emily and I raised together, is now 6 years old. She has become a small ray of light in our family. Her energy and curiosity remind me that life is a constant forward motion. Every laugh she makes, every question she asks fills me with gratitude for choosing to move on, even when it seemed impossible. Emily and I are not resting on our laurels. Our agency continues to grow. We travel the world, explore new cultures, and are inspired by the beauty that surrounds us. But the most important thing is that we always return home, where our children, our cozy life, and our true love story are waiting for us. Looking at how our life is developing, I realize that every challenge, every pain, and every loss had its meaning. They helped me become who I am today. And if I can give one piece of advice to those who are going through difficult times, it is this: don't be afraid of changes. They can be painful, but they open the door to a new life that can exceed all your expectations.